So, if you're a young professional or an entrepreneur and you find yourself always being stressed out, I made this video specifically for you. And to be honest, even if you're not an entrepreneur, even if you're not a busy professional, but you still find yourself stressed out, this video is still guaranteed to help you. So, stick around until the end, and I guarantee you'll get a lot out of this video. Now, I want to address this. Everyone is burnt out, at least from what I'm seeing, everyone's burnt out. So, I saw a stat not too long ago, and it was saying that I guess previously the most stressed and burnt out workers were those from the age of 35 to 44. And now, currently, the most burnt out and stressed demographic of people are workers from the age of 18 to 22. So, the age in which people get more stressed has decreased recently. It's 18 to 22 now. It used to be 35 to 44. And there's a few different reasons why that could be the case. I'm not sure of the exact reasoning. By the way, let me know in the comments what you think the reason for this is. But just as I kind of think about it, some of the reasons why this could be the case, why younger people are so much more stressed now than they have been in recent generations, at least according to this data, I think could be attributed to a variety of issues, such as a sudden thrust into the corporate world for young people, maybe a lack of experience in a corporate setting. I think making that shift from college or even maybe high school to working in an office setting or a corporate setting could be a bit jarring. It could be a bit different. It could be a lot of work put upon somebody all at once without much time to transition into it. I think the reward of maybe working in those settings or working in general might not meet expectations, as you probably know now. Hopefully, you know this. Inflation is very high, so the value of your dollar has decreased. I think perhaps working at a job and maybe going into the job thinking that you'll make 40, 50, or 60K, and that's a lot of money, only to find out that it doesn't necessarily even buy you, or I should say, afford you a one bedroom apartment in the area you live in. That could be a bit jarring. That could be a bit disheartening. And that might contribute to you feeling burnt out or stressed out. I have my own theories on what creates burnout in the grand scheme of things. I have separate videos about that, so I'm not going to get too deep into that here. But I do think that could be a contributing factor. And like I said, it could also just be the heavy demands of the corporate world. It could just be a lot of work being put on people all at once, especially young people, and they just might not know exactly how to deal with that. So those are just a few of my personal insights. Some things that could be right. I'm not saying they are right, but they could be right. But one thing that I have noticed in general, just in my own personal life with this business, when I do see people consistently getting burnt out or consistently feeling stressed out by work, and I want to emphasize the word consistently because everyone gets burnt out, everyone gets stressed. But if you find yourself consistently getting burnt out or consistently being stressed, I think that's where the problem kind of lies. That's when you have an issue that you need to sort of identify and kind of work through. Whenever I see that, I tend to find that their work habits are lacking. They have poor habits, is what it comes down to. And so in this video, I want to kind of address that. And I want to offer some suggestions that you can use if you're in that situation that could help you reduce your burnout and overall stress. Now, what I'm going to share with you applies to the workplace, of course, but it also applies to life outside of the office. So don't think that just because you don't work at a corporate job, these tips that I'm going to share with you don't apply. If you feel stressed out or overwhelmed in life in general, these tips will still apply just as well. So before I get into the actual meat and potatoes of this video, I want to share with you, who am I? Who am I? Why am I qualified in any way to share this information with you? There's a long list of things so far in my relatively short life that I've accomplished. But kind of the main things that I want to share with you. I'm the former owner of College Conqueror. College Conqueror, for those of you that are watching that are not familiar, it's a business I created almost a decade ago, really. And pretty much the core of the business was helping high school and college students succeed in college and beyond. And currently, I'm the owner of Productivity Accelerator. Productivity Accelerator is a business that helps young professionals and entrepreneurs get more done in less time with as little friction and stress as humanly possible. Personally, I think that a lot of people make life more difficult because they don't understand how to get work done efficiently. It's kind of that idea of working smarter versus harder. A lot of people that I see are working harder, and they're working harder only to not even achieve much. You can work smarter and get a lot done. You don't have to work super hard to make significant progress. So that is what Productivity Accelerator is all about. I created that business about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago or so. It's been doing well so far, and I want to kind of share my philosophies with more people so that way more people can work smarter instead of harder and get more things done in less time. Now, on to the actual skills and tips and techniques that you can use. How to mitigate stress. Arguably, most people hate feeling stressed. Now, one thing I found is that if you feel stressed, especially consistently, it is one of the biggest detriments to your life. And it's weird because this is not talked about nearly enough. If you're stressed, it impacts every aspect of your life and it makes life significantly more difficult. You do not want to be stressed. I kind of wrote a few different things that I've personally seen in my own life and in the lives of other people. But if you're stressed a lot, it's going to lead to a bad diet, and that's going to lead to weight gain. And of course, if you start to get into a bad diet, you start to gain weight. It'll probably lead to low self-esteem in the grand scheme of things. If you're overstressed, it can lead to a lack of ambition. I tend to find that a lot of people, when they're really stressed, say for example, they go to work, they're super stressed out from their job, they come home and they kind of just go full potato mode, full vegetable mode. They want to binge watch Netflix, they want to eat ice cream, they want to just do as little as possible because they're so stressed out and so overwhelmed. And I totally understand that. But that's a problem. You don't want to be that stressed out that you come home and do nothing that benefits your life. If you're stressed out, it leads to a poor personality. And when I say poor personality, I mean that both financially and I mean that also in the sense that you're just a dick to people. People who get stressed out kind of like throw their stress onto other people. I'm sure you've seen that if you've worked in any like retail setting I'm sure everyone's met someone who's just like super agitated and super annoying and they just kind of, I don't know, they're just shooting out negativity all over the place and they're trying to push their negativity onto you. Chances are it's because they're super stressed out and they don't know how to manage their stress effectively. They might not even really acknowledge that they're super stressed out. But I tend to find that this is a big reason why they act this way. They're super stressed out. And I've also found that the more stressed out you are, the riskier your decision making becomes. And when I say risky, I mean you're just doing things to kind of get that dopamine high. This could lead to certain activities like drugs being used when you get stressed out a lot. You kind of fall into the category of maybe drinking too much, smoking weed too much, doing other drugs, other recreational activities that aren't super beneficial to you. And of course, if you do those things long enough, they lead to bad long-term results. So in the grand scheme of things, I just want to like emphasize this point. Being stressed out is far more detrimental to you than people share. A lot of people don't really, get too deep into it, but it's horrible to be stressed out. Now, I like to say that I'm stress's worst enemy. And the reason why I say this is because I don't get stressed out that much. I'm not saying I never get stressed out. Everyone gets stressed out. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't get stressed out that much. And this is not just me saying this. This is something I've been told on numerous occasions. Now, for the past 10 years plus, I've been in a lot of different positions that are typically considered high stress positions. Currently, outside of Productivity Accelerator is just one example. Trying to own your own business, trying to generate leads, trying to deal with different customer service issues, trying to deal with different technical issues when it comes to your website or just everything. That is stressful in itself. On the side, I'm also the head of business development at a few different medical laboratories. That is stressful. In the past, I've been vice president of an organization. That can be stressful. So there's a list of things. I worked at a law firm. That is stressful, or it can be stressful. I wasn't super stressed out by it, but it can be stressful. There were times I was certainly stressed, of course. But the point that I'm making is that I've been in plenty of situations that most would consider high stress situations. And I found ways to navigate them without being super stressed. And it was to the point where people would like notice it and they'd say, "Oh man, you don't get stressed out. I'm stressed out by this little thing and you're doing like all this stuff and you're still not stressed out." So this is kind of why I'm sharing this video with you, because I do have a few different techniques that I like to use to not get stressed out. These are things that I found that if I don't do these things that I'm going to share with you, I will get stressed out, which is why I do them. So I'm hoping that you can kind of take some of these suggestions and apply them to your own life. Now, I'm going to share with you 4 different things that I use in my own life to help mitigate my stress. Again, I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that you'll never be stressed if you do these 4 things, but I am saying that you'll be significantly less stressed if you actually do these 4 things. All 4 things, not just one of the 4 things, not 2, not 3, all 4 of these things. So, step number 1, list all of your projects. Now, in my personal experience, a lot of stress tends to come from people trying to keep track of too many things all at once. I've kind of come to realize that we have a limited amount of bandwidth. Everyone kind of has their own different tolerances, and some people can handle more things than others. You got to figure out what your tolerance level is. But what you don't want to do is try to take on too much into your head at once. You don't want to be memorizing 1,000 different things. You don't want to be doing 1,000 different things all at one time. This is what leads to cognitive overwhelm. And this is going to stress you out a lot. I'm sure you've been in that position, especially if you're in a workplace situation. And in work, it's a bit difficult because sometimes if you have a boss, your boss tends to like just put stuff on you. Imagine you're at your office, you're working on maybe 2 different tasks, or at least for the day, you plan to work on 2 different tasks that your manager or boss or whoever gave you. And someone else, a supervisor, maybe the same boss, maybe a different boss, comes over and gives you 5 more things. And he or she has the expectation that they should be done relatively quickly. You'll get stressed, right? And it's because you're getting too much on your plate. It's too much to handle all at once. Now, of course, if these like 6 or 7 or 8 things were split up and pushed out down the line, if you could have one thing today, maybe 1 or 2 things end of this week, one more thing next week, something else a month later, that's perfectly fine. That's manageable. But it's when everything's pushed on you at once that life gets stressful, that work gets stressful. So what I recommend doing is this. Free up that bandwidth by writing down all of your projects that need to be accomplished. Personally, I recommend taking out a sheet of paper and just writing it down, just jotting everything down. The reason why I recommend paper is because what I've found, and studies do suggest this, when you write things down on paper, it activates a certain part of your brain that allows you to kind of internalize whatever you've written down easier. So to kind of keep it simple, when you write things down, you kind of embed it into your subconscious and you memorize it simpler without having to really put that much effort into memorizing it. I tend to find that if you just kind of write it in your phone, it doesn't really stay in your head and it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that the list even exists. I'm sure right now you have text messages that you may have forgotten about. You might have a notepad setting. I know this is true of myself. I use my notes feature in my phone and I write stuff in my notes and I forget that I even wrote it in my notes and I forget that it's even there until, something prompts me to remember it. Then I have to go back and go through my notes and figure out what I even wrote. But when I write things down in my notepad or my journal, it's sticky. It stays in my head. I don't have to really go back to my journal to remember what I wrote down. Maybe I don't remember the exact words verbatim, but I do remember the gist of what I wrote down. As a side note, it's a similar strategy to note taking in college. When I did College Conqueror, there was a lot of research that suggested that writing notes by hand was far more efficient. I think 47% more efficient, something like that, than typing it out. Sadly, most students sit there and they type out their notes while in lectures or while in college. But it's actually quite inefficient. You're better off just writing it out by hand because it helps you memorize the content faster and easier, which of course is better for good grades, but that's a whole different story. So I recommend paper if you have the time and if you can do it. If you can't use paper, then I recommend this is what I do. I use the Kanban feature in Notion. Essentially what the Kanban feature is, it's just different kind of columns. The first column might say not worked on. The second column is in progress. And the third column is completed. And essentially what you're doing is you're putting everything that you haven't worked on in the first column. And as you begin to work on them, you drag them to the next column. And then as you complete those tasks, you put them in the completed column. I tend to find that it gives your brain a sense of completion. It helps you kind of see everything. It helps everything stay organized. And that's really what you want. You want to get everything out of your head and in a format that's easily visible to you. So this is just kind of my strategy, but no matter how you go about doing this, the first step is just write out everything. List every single project you have. Personally, I think you should take about 20 to 45 minutes to do this. You don't need to take all day, but you should give it a good amount of quality time. So that's step number one. List all of your projects. Step number two, organize your projects from most to least important. So when I say this, what I mean is all those projects you listed, the things that matter the most, put them first. The things that matter the least, put them last. Now, it's up to you to discern what most and least mean. If it's in a workplace setting, most could be the thing that your boss wants done like now, like today, like right away. They want it on their desk in like 10 minutes. That will be the most important thing because it's the most important and it's the most urgent. The thing that doesn't matter the most, maybe there's an email that you want to answer or you know you can answer, but if you don't answer it anytime today or the next week or even the next month, no one will really care. That's not very important. Put that at the bottom of your list. Or maybe in your own personal life. Let's just take an example outside of the workplace. Maybe outside of the workplace, say for example, you're doing community service and this community service, this organization that does community service means a lot to you. And maybe they're asking you to complete this presentation. That might be very important to you. And maybe the presentation is due in about a week or two. Cool. Put that at the top of your list, or at least close to the top of your list. Maybe you also want to take some art class. Do you need to learn art? Not really. It's not very important. It's not very urgent. So what you can do is put that at the bottom of your list. Now, when I used to work at a law firm, one of the main attorneys, he was notorious for giving people more work every single day. That was his thing. Like, because he was always in the sort of mindset of marketing as well as like running the business, which is, that's perfectly fine. That's normal. But of course, I think sometimes when you have like a boss or when you have like a manager or someone in that position, maybe they know this, or I don't know if they disregard this, but they can think of ideas faster than many people can implement those ideas. Like I know this for myself. I can sit there in a single day and have like 1,000 different ideas. I can write them all out. But if I have employees, there's no way you can expect your employees to finish work given to them at the rate that you get the idea. Does that make sense? Like if I have like, say for example, 20 YouTube videos that pop into my head all at once, I don't expect anyone to finish 20 YouTube videos in a single day. It's unrealistic. But sometimes when you have a boss, I understand that they might not think that way. So they're just giving out work like candy, and you can't get it done quickly. And my boss at the law firm, the main attorney, was notorious for doing just that. So usually what I would do, and I found this worked very well, is to not stress myself out. What I would do is I'd organize all of the work he'd give me from the most important to the least important. And the key when you're doing this, there's a key that needs to be done when you're trying to kind of sort these things out. The first thing is you need to know if a task or project has a deadline. And if it doesn't have a deadline, give it a deadline. Everything needs to have a deadline, unless it's super unimportant. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Unless it's super unimportant, everything needs to have a deadline. If no deadline has been provided, give yourself a deadline. That is the key thing. That's the very first thing you should do when you're organizing all these different tasks. Give everything a deadline. Now, the way I like to give myself deadlines, especially if a deadline has not been provided, is I kind of use what's called the Eisenhower matrix. Now, essentially what the Eisenhower matrix is, it's a big square. You can kind of see the visual here. It's a square that you kind of separate into 4 smaller squares within the big square. Pretty much the purpose of these 4 squares, these quadrants we'll call them, is to kind of help determine if something is 1, urgent and important, 2, urgent but not important, 3, not important yet urgent, and 4, not important and also not urgent. You want to tackle and arrange tasks in this order, the order I just suggested, starting from urgent and important all the way down to not important and not urgent. And to be honest, if you find things that are not important and not urgent, a lot of those things I just wouldn't even do, or I wouldn't make a big deal out of them. Does that make sense? So I'll give you kind of an example of my own personal life on what I mean by this. Some of the things I'm working on currently, I'm doing so kind of just to give an example of what I do in my own life and what I'm doing currently in my own life. There's a boot camp that I'm going to do, a productivity boot camp. It's going to be at the beginning of November. It's kind of a slight plug. Feel free to join. This link in the description below. You can sign up for that. But there's a lot of marketing I want to do for this boot camp. Some of the marketing involves creating postcards, making Facebook ads, creating email campaigns. I give each of these different tasks a deadline, and I give them a deadline based on how important and how urgent they are. Now, for the postcards, I give it about a week. That's my deadline. 1 week to get all the postcards done. Email campaign, not as important. I give myself 3 weeks to kind of get it all done. And I'm not saying it'll take me 3 weeks, but I give myself 3 weeks to get it all done. On the side, and this is not part of my business, I also want to take drawing lessons. I just want to get into drawing. I'm trying to create my own comic book. It's not important and it's not urgent. If I don't draw anytime soon, it's totally okay. It's inconsequential. It does not matter in the grand scheme of things because it does not affect the main goal that I have, which is, right now at least, preparing for this productivity boot camp. Does that make sense? So as far as organization is concerned, the thing that's urgent and important, the top of my list, is sending out these postcards. Number 2, something that's urgent but not important or not as important, is creating this email campaign. And then I know I gave kind of 3 things. The last thing, the thing I'm putting in last place, not important and not urgent, would be taking these drawing classes. I don't need to do it. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't impact my primary goal. So just don't do it, or at the very least, schedule it at the very end of the day when you can get to it. And that kind of leads me to the next step. Put everything in a planner. Based on how you organized everything, put it in your planner and begin working on it. And what I mean by this is anything you listed as important and urgent should be worked on first every single day. And I know some people, if you're watching this, you might think to yourself, well, I have a job. I have a 9 to 5, so I can't work on it first thing every single day. That's totally fine. If you can't work on it at the very beginning of your day, the moment you finish your job, that should be the thing you work on. Or at the very least, if you're working on different projects and different tasks, make that the priority after you get out of work. I say this because sometimes what I find people do, I've had clients do this, is they work on the things that are most appealing and the things that are easiest to do, but not the most necessary. So they won't work on the things that are urgent and important, but they'll work on the thing that's maybe, somewhat important, not super urgent. Save that for the end of the day, or put that off until a later date, or even delegate it if you can. The thing that's urgent and important, and the reality is that sometimes things that are urgent and important aren't super exciting, they're not super fun, but that's the way it works sometimes. That should be the thing you tackle first, as soon as you can. Everything else, put it off or don't do it. This is how you mitigate stress while guaranteeing that you get more stuff done. This is how you become more productive. This is how you ultimately delete things and keep them from kind of overflowing in your head. It prevents this sort of cognitive overload. Now, one thing I want to recommend, because I tend to find a lot of people run into this issue, some people don't know how long a project or task will take. And in my personal experience, when you're first working on something, you won't know how long a project or task will take. You might have an idea, but you might not know for sure. And you won't know for sure until you've done it consistently enough that you can get a general understanding of how long something takes you. What I usually recommend is, for tasks like that, allocate as much time as possible until you get an idea of how long you'll take. So here's a quick example. I edit websites on the side, and I do video editing. And video editing and website editing take a long time. They take a long time. Sometimes they're short. It depends on the website, depends on the video. But most of the time, they both take a significant amount of time. Now, usually, in my experience, depends on the website, depends on the video, of course. But if I'm doing, say, for example, a reel, an Instagram reel, for about a 30-second to 1 minute reel, usually takes me about a half an hour to an hour. So I know to allocate that much time for one reel. For one reel, a website, depending on the complexity, usually takes me about 1 to 3 weeks. Depends on the complexity, depends on the urgency, but it usually takes me about 1 to 3 weeks. Usually, if I work on it for about 3 hours a day, I can get a really good website complete in about 1 to 3 weeks. So what I do is when I work on websites or when I work on videos, I put that in my planner in blocks of 3 to 5 hours. If I'm working on reels, I just block off 3 to 5 hours of my day specifically to work on reels or videos or whatever I need to do. And my thought process is, if I finish before the 3 to 5 hours is up, that's perfectly fine. I've earned 3 to 5 hours, or I've earned 2 hours or 1 hour, whatever, to do something else or to do more videos. Doesn't matter. I've earned time. If it takes me 3 to 5 hours, that's perfect because that's what I planned. If it takes longer, that's also fine because I walk in with the understanding that it might take me a long time. Does that make sense? So, again, if you don't know how long something will take, allocate as much time as you kind of overestimate how much time it'll take you to get that thing done. I say this because I found in my own life that if you kind of under allocate time, you'll get stressed out because the work will begin to pile up. I've had so many times in my life where I thought that a project might take me, say, for example, 2 hours, and it took me maybe a couple days, or it took me at least like, say, 5 hours. And that became stressful. The idea of this project taking longer than I anticipated began to stress me out. And it also kind of works against you because you start to pile on other things. Like maybe I've had times where I thought project would take 3 hours and I had other things I intended to do the next day or after that project. Everything just kind of begins to pile on top of each other. And it goes back to kind of the first point where you kind of increase your mental bandwidth. You're kind of adding more things to your mental bandwidth, and that's going to stress you out. So again, when you're kind of allocating time, allocate extra time if you have to. If you don't know how long something will take, give it extra time. In general, you should always be allocating a little bit more time than you anticipate, just in case. But if it's like the very first time you're working on something, or if you're kind of new to working on something, add an additional 1, 2, 3, even 5 hours if you can to completing that project or task. And then this leads to the final step. Let momentum guide you. One thing I think people make this massive mistake of thinking that they need to be motivated to get stuff done. You can't rely on being motivated. Most of the time, you won't feel like doing something. So you need momentum to kind of push you. At least in my experience, this is what I found to be true. Now, what I recommend you do is use what I call the J curve. If you're not familiar with this kind of terminology, the J curve comes from economics. It's something when I did College Conqueror, I realized was a good tool, not just for economics, but also for productivity. And essentially what the J curve is, in your mind, just picture kind of like a chart and picture a J. Like you start here, kind of at the far left side of the J, you go down, and then you kind of come up to complete the J. Essentially, though, what it is you start working on something and your performance will decrease initially because you don't want to do that thing. But as you kind of persevere and continue to work on something, you find that your results increase. So you kind of force motivation upon yourself. What I would typically do, because back when I did College Conqueror, sometimes I would do articles, I would do guest posts, and I wasn't always motivated to read studies. If you can imagine, just picture kind of like 20-page studies. Sometimes they can be very boring. A lot of times they can be pretty boring. I tried to keep myself on a certain time frame. I would always give myself deadlines to kind of get an article out every single week. So just imagine you're reading multiple articles every single week, not including the time it takes to actually draft the article you're going to write, plus publish it, proofread it, all that stuff. I didn't feel like doing it a lot of times. But what I realized is that if I just kind of sat down at my desk and just begin to work on something, like begin to work on the article, even if it was a little bit of reading or a little bit of note taking for these studies that I was reading, after about 15 to 20 minutes, and I know that sounds like a long time, and it is a bit of a long time, but it's not that long. It's really not that long in the grand scheme of things. If you give yourself about 15 to 20 minutes, you'll kind of find that you've adapted to just working on this project or task. And it's no longer a chore and no longer is a bother. You don't feel like it's a hassle. And in a weird way, you kind of like it. You're like, oh, I'm already working on it. So now it's kind of nice. It's almost like hopefully you might be familiar with this. It's kind of like going to the gym. Like sometimes if you're new to going to the gym, or even if you've been going to the gym for a while, you don't feel like going to the gym. But if you go and start to work out for about 10, 15, 20 minutes, you kind of get into a groove. And once you get into that groove, then the rest of the workout kind of it ends up being better than your normal workouts. At least this is my experience. I can't say everyone's had this experience, but this tends to be my experience. So really, if you kind of just push past that initial barrier, in the grand scheme of things, it works out. Another example is kind of waking up. I tend to wake up pretty early, and If you've ever tried to wake up early, it sucks. Like you hear the alarm, you're kind of tired, you want to stay in bed for like 5, 10, 15 more minutes, hit snooze like over and over again. If you manage to kind of ignore that like voice in your head that tells you to go back to sleep or that tells you that it's not worth getting up, if you ignore that voice and just get up, within like 10, 15, 20 minutes, you'll find that it's actually not that bad. You're not even that tired. You actually feel great. Most of the time, you just feel great. Unless you haven't slept in like days, and obviously you're going to be tired. But for the most part, you don't feel tired. You feel perfectly fine. And then you can just get on with your day as intended. And actually, you feel better because you did the thing you said you were going to do, which is wake up early. So that's one thing I recommend doing. Kind of following what I call the J curve. Kind of force yourself to do something for 15, 20 minutes. And then it becomes pleasant after that 15 to 20 minute time span. The second thing you can do is work on something that you actually do like, just to get the momentum going, just to get you into the mood of actually working. And then after about 30 minutes, 20 minutes or so, shift to the thing you didn't want to do that much. And so what I mean by this is currently I still write articles. Sometimes I just don't want to write an article. Sometimes I just don't feel creative when it comes to writing. Like you don't really know the exact words to say. You don't really know exactly where you want to start. You don't really know how you want to begin. If it gets to a point where I look at the screen and I can't think of anything to write, what I'll do is I'll start working on the thumbnail for that video, or maybe a thumbnail for a different video, or maybe I'll proofread a different blog post. I think I said video. I meant blog post. Maybe I'll start proofreading a different blog post. I do something. And by doing something, it gives me enough motivation and it kind of gets me into enough of a flow state that I can transfer it to the main thing I wanted to do. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's what I recommend. Allow momentum to keep you going. And so that's kind of like my 4 steps. First step, list all of your projects. Second step, organize all of your projects from the most important to the least important. Third step, put everything in the planner so you can see it, so you know exactly when you're going to work on it, so you can get an idea of how long it'll take. And the fourth step, let momentum guide you. Just kind of get to work. And once you get to work, allow yourself to work as long as you can to make sure you get as much stuff done. You do these things, and I can guarantee you'll be a lot less stressed. I tend to find that a lot of your stress comes from just life being chaotic. And really what it is you don't feel like you're in control. But if you do these 4 steps, this is a form of you organizing yourself and essentially taking back control of your life. You taking back control of your day, of your time. In every sense, this is the most efficient manner of reducing stress. So, like I said, follow these 4 rules and I guarantee you'll be a lot less stressed. And of course, the less stressed you are, the higher your quality of life will be. So if you enjoyed that video, hope you like it. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you've tried this before. Let me know if you have other ways that work for you. And before you leave, just one more thing. If you click the link below, you'll find my Productivity Accelerator Masterclass. I highly recommend it. I'm biased, of course, but I highly recommend it if you want to be more productive and if you want to get a lot more stuff done in a lot less time. It's 30 minutes. It's a 30-minute video. It'll walk you through my exact 3-step process. My 3P method is what I call it, to guarantee that every single day is successful, and it'll help you easily achieve any goal, whether it's financial, whether it's physical, or whether it's social, in less than 30 minutes. It's 100% free. And if you're interested, just click the link below. It'll take you right there. You don't have to sign up. You don't need any credit card, nothing like that. And I guarantee you'll not regret it. So like I said, if you like the video, please like it. Please comment. Please share this video with someone else that might find it interesting. And I hope to see you in the next video. Peace out. Bye.